challenges as an industry. When I say industry, I mean public power on a national level, and by and large, these challenges impact utilities large and small. Tax-exempt financing is one of the big issues that we're contending with as an industry. Tax-exempt financing refers to the availability of municipal bonds. Most of the capital projects in this country are paid for by municipal bonds. It lowers public power's access to tax-exempt financing, lowers the cost of financing for capital projects like building a new power plant or replacing substations or transformers. The electric utility industry is a capital-intensive industry. It costs a lot of money to maintain the distribution system, and it certainly costs a lot of money to build new generation. So having access to tax-exempt financing or municipal bonds is a very important element for not only public power utilities, but for cities and towns, government entities all across the country for things like capital improvements on infrastructure, building of bridges, schools, and that sort of thing. APPA is adamantly is an adamant proponent of continuing to make tax-exempt financing available to certainly our members, to public power at large. It has been available as a vehicle for financing for more than 200 years. And I want to get these numbers right. So if tax-exempt financing goes away, and we don't have access to municipal bonds, the cost to electric utilities like Logansport could go up by as much as 35% for capital projects in the future. And you know, so Americans buy municipal bonds as an investment vehicle, and quite frankly, most of the people that buy municipal bonds are not wealthy people. 50% of the people that purchase municipal bonds earn less than $250,000 a year. And 75% of the individuals that purchase municipal bonds earn less than $1 million a year. But if you think about the large investors, the individuals that have huge stock portfolios, you know, we're not talking about them. We're talking about average Americans that look to municipal bonds as a way to finance their retirement in a very fixed, conservative fashion with a reasonable rate of return. So we are very much concerned about the future of tax-exempt financing. The reason the federal government is looking at reducing or eliminating tax-exempt financing is to pay for deficit reduction. There's been a lot of talk about, you know, getting constructive about reducing our federal deficit, and this is one thing that is being looked at closely, as well as the prospect of tax cuts, paying for tax cuts. So that is a big issue for us. The increasing environmental regulations is it's impacting the electric utility industry in a very big way. The EPA has been very active in the last decade or half decade or so, certainly with the current administration, in enforcing the Section 111 of the Clean Air Act, and that is essentially putting a real strain on any electric utility that owns and operates a coal generation facility. What that means is that if the EPA continues to go down the path that it's going down, it's going to make it very difficult to operate coal generation moving forward, unless you are willing to spend a considerable amount of money to retrofit existing plants with the latest scrubbing technology to be in compliance with the EPA requirements. The requirement that is going to impact a number of coal generation plants in the immediate future is set to take effect in the summer of 2015, and that's called the Mercury Air Toxic, or MATS, requirement, and what we're looking at is the prospect of losing anywhere from 30 to 70 gigawatts of electricity. What that equates to, a gigawatt, it could serve 750,000 to 1 million homes. If we're looking at losing upwards of 60 or 70 gigawatts of that capacity, you have to ask yourself the question, okay, well, how do we backfill that? I mean, what do we do as a country? You know, what are we looking at with regards to electricity supply in the future? I don't doubt, you know, it's my organization's position that we do need to be practical about taking measured steps to, you know, to be good stewards of the environment. But we also believe that we have to be pragmatic as it relates to steps that we take to ensure we're economically viable and competitive in the global market. So the potential cost of these retirements of these coal plants could reach $275 billion between now and 2035. It is substantial, and it's very real. This is more likely to happen than not. There are other standards, and I'm not going to go too deep into this. I'm not the most technical person on staff. I'll just throw that out there for full disclosure. But there are several other options that the EPA is pursuing under the Clean Air Act. One for existing fossil fuel plants, called the New Source Performance Standards for existing fossil fuel plants, and that would limit the amount of CO2 that can be displaced by burning fossil fuel, and it would require, essentially, for utility to be in compliance, it would require that 30% of those emissions be injected into the ground by way of carbon capture and storage. I don't know if any of you have heard about this process, but it is not commercially viable. It has not been proven on a commercial scale, but yet it is part of the EPA's plan to regulate the fossil fuel generation in the future. It's a big concern for our industry. And it should be a concern for the consumers in this country, quite frankly, because ultimately, it could impact utility rates, and it could impact them significantly. Stable or declining load growth. I'm just going to mention about this that there have been a lot of variables that have impacted load growth or electricity demand in the last half decade. We went through one of the deepest recessions since the Great Depression. We have lost manufacturing in this country that hasn't fully come back. If you look at the load growth projections over a 10-year time frame, they've certainly have gotten less rosy. We're looking at 1% load growth for the foreseeable future, and if you look back more than a half decade ago, it was more like 3 or 4%. And that was, quite frankly, the average load growth in our country for a number of years. So that puts, and also another thing that's contributing to a decline in load growth are energy efficiency measures and energy conservation measures. Things like the Energy Star program and building codes that require you to use insulation that saves energy. These are all having a measurable impact on the electric utility industry. So that's a good thing, but also it eats into the electric utility's bottom line revenue. So that is also a concern and something that we have to, as an industry, adapt to. We're seeing an increase in threats from a cybersecurity perspective, as are any industries today, and as well as physical security. There was a high-profile incident last year at this time in California where what is being called a terrorist at this point shot out transformers in a major substation that serves the Silicon Valley. They used a high-power rifle, and they spent 20 minutes shooting at transformers that spilled thousands of gallons of oil on the ground, and they did it in a very calculated fashion. This was publicized, and actually publicized very recently in the Wall Street Journal through a number of expose articles that highlight the vulnerability of our electric grid by way of these main interconnections or transmission distribution connections. That is an issue that we're going to be contending with, and we may have to deal with increased regulation that it's going to cost more money, and ultimately that's borne by the American consumer. And cybersecurity, obviously, that there are a number of attacks on industries every day from foreign sources and here within our country, and we are being vigilant about that, but that is something that we're concerned about. Higher reliability. We are, the number of data centers and high-tech facilities that we're courting in this country, they demand reliability that is 99.99999 on out, reliable, up all the time. You can't do business with a company like Google or another enterprise like that if you don't keep the lights on all the time. That's a challenge for electric utilities. And changing customer expectations. There has been more development in the electric utility industry in the last 10 years than there has been in the last 100 previous years. Concepts like advanced metering technology, the ability to deploy meters that can be read from the electric utility operations center and send price signals out to customers. Customers being able to check their utility rates on their iPhone. That's here now, and you're going to continue to see that technology be deployed on a large scale moving forward. And in the electric utility industry, by and large, and it's not just public power, but by and large, has an aging workforce. I'm not sure what the impetus is, but the electric utility industry workforce is older by, if you look at comparative industries, is older than any other industry virtually out there. So we have a challenge backfilling very technical positions in many cases, like line workers, technical engineers, and operations specialists for key positions. And for public power, that is a challenge, because one of the knocks on public power is that the compensation is not equivalent to the investor-owned utility counterparts, and in many cases the rural electric cooperative counterparts. And for public power to be competitive in the future, we need to address that issue of retirements, but it's going to be a challenge for us.